The woods held a profound stillness, a quietude that should have signaled danger to Arya. Experience had taught her that an absolute lack of sound in the wild invariably meant predators, and predators spelled peril. Yet a bone-weary exhaustion had settled upon her, a deep fatigue born from 3 weeks of traversing between wolf packs, offering her medicinal expertise in exchange for meager sustenance and a place to rest. Her once lustrous white hair now fell limply around her shoulders. Her pallid complexion was streaked with grime, and her gray eyes burned from a deficit of sleep. She should have sought slumber hours ago, but the nearest human settlement remained a full day's journey distant, and the notion of sleeping alone in the forest had never previously unsettled her. She had been accustomed to it since she was 15 years old, ever since the brutal raid that claimed her parents and left her an orphan, with no pack willing to adopt a girl who resembled a phantom. Arya's distinct appearance had always been a source of difficulty. Her hair gleamed like freshly fallen snow. Her skin was so fair it appeared almost ethereal, and her eyes mirrored the turbulent hues of winter storms. The healers had explained to her parents that she wasn't entirely albino, but close enough that fellow wolves found her unnerving, unnatural, and ill omen. When her parents perished defending their small community from a rogue assault, no one made a significant effort to retain their unusually featured daughter. She was provided with a meager collection of provisions and directed towards the borderlands before her parents' bodies had even been committed to the earth. That was 7 years prior. 7 years of aimless wandering, of extending her healing capabilities to anyone who offered recompense, of consciously avoiding deep connections because such bonds inevitably led to sorrow when they eventually distanced themselves. She possessed a remarkable gift for healing. Both her parents had been skilled practitioners, and they had rigorously tutored her before their untimely demise. Nevertheless, no amount of proficiency could alleviate the discomfort of those around someone who bore the semblance of death itself. The piercing shriek that rent the silence was high-pitched and filled with terror. A pup. No, not a mere pup. A wolf cub. Arya froze, every primal instinct urging her to flee. Wolf cubs invariably meant their protective parents were nearby. Protective parents signified territorial adult wolves who would not welcome an intruder venturing near their young. However, the cry echoed again, feebler this time, followed by a whimper that pierced her very soul. She was already in motion before rational thought could restrain her, following the plaintive sound through the dense undergrowth. Her innate healing sense, the intuitive awareness that allowed her to perceive ailments and injuries in all living beings, suddenly ignited. Pain, an overwhelming surge of pain. The cub was gravely wounded. Arya broke through a thicket of thorny bushes and halted abruptly. The wolf cub was diminutive, likely only a few months old, its pristine white fur matted with blood. It was struggling to drag itself across the forest floor, one hind leg bent at an unnatural angle, deep lacerations marring its back and still weeping blood. Standing between the cub and the safety of the trees were 3 rogues in their lupine forms, their bodies scarred and mangy, their eyes glinting with malevolent intent. This was no mere hunt. This was deliberate torment. They were toying with the cub, allowing it brief moments to attempt escape before yanking it back, reveling in its fear. "Hey!" Arya's voice erupted before her mind could intercede. "Leave it alone." The 3 rogues swiveled their heads towards her, and in that instant they recognized her for what she was. A lone Omega, undefended, unarmed. One of them transitioned into human form, a towering man with a disfigured face and a gaze that held no warmth. "Well, well," he rumbled, his voice like gravel. "The moon goddess truly favors us today. First, the pleasure of dispatching the little prince, and now a delicate Omega to amuse ourselves with. Though you are a rather peculiar sight, aren't you? Like a corpse that neglected to decay." Prince. Arya's mind raced. White fur, hunted by rogues with a specific intent to kill. Oh dear, this was no ordinary cub. This was someone of consequence, someone whose demise would be deeply felt. I haven't the faintest idea what you are implying, Arya stated, striving to maintain a steady tone. But you ought to cease your torment of that cub and depart from this place. The rogue emitted a harsh laugh, and the other two also assumed human guises, positioning themselves to flank her. Or what? You intend to confront us, spectral girl? You bear no pack affiliation. I can detect it. You are insignificant, and no one will lament your passing when we are finished. He spoke the truth. She was nobody. No pack would seek retribution for her end. No one would even register her absence. But that cub, that small white wolf bleeding on the ground, was somebody. And Arya had spent 7 years being nobody. She was weary of being nothing, weary of witnessing suffering and walking past, deeming involvement too perilous, weary of merely surviving when she had ceased to truly live years ago. You are correct, she conceded softly, reaching into her satchel. I am nobody, which implies I have nothing to forfeit. She withdrew the blade her father had bequeathed her, her sole armament, and charged at the closest rogue. The ensuing conflict was savage and desperate. Arya was not a combatant. She had received rudimentary self-defense instruction from her father, but her true calling was healing, not warfare. The rogues were larger, stronger, and honed for conflict. However, she possessed the advantage of surprise, and more critically, she wielded fury. Years of pent-up resentment towards a world that had treated her as refuse, towards packs that had exploited her talents only to discard her, towards the sheer injustice of being penalized for circumstances beyond her control. She struck the first rogue in the throat, her blade finding a vital artery before he could deflect. He collapsed, gurgling, blood spattering the ground. The second rogue seized her from behind, his claws tearing through her tunic and flesh, raking across her ribs. Arya cried out, but utilized the momentum to drive her elbow into his face, shattering his nose. As his grip loosened, she spun and thrust upwards, impaling him beneath the chin. The steel penetrated his mouth and lodged in his brain. He fell lifeless. The third rogue, witnessing the demise of his companions, reverted to his wolf form and lunged. Arya attempted to evade, but her movements were too sluggish, her body too damaged. His teeth sank into her shoulder, shaking her as if she were a mere plaything. She felt bones fracture, felt her knife slip from her numb fingers. He hurled her against a tree, and the impact sent her sliding to the ground. Through unfocused vision, she saw him stalking towards the cub, which had been attempting to crawl away amidst the melee. No, she hadn't endured all this merely to falter. Now Arya's healing senses shrieked at her, cataloging her injuries with chilling precision. 3 fractured ribs, a punctured lung, a shattered shoulder, deep lacerations across her abdomen, internal hemorrhaging. She was succumbing. She had mere minutes, at best. But her gift was not solely for diagnosing afflictions. It was for mending them. And healing was merely the redirection of vital energy from one point to another, encouraging the organism to regenerate more swiftly. She had been instructed to exercise caution with it, never to overexert, never to deplete herself to a perilous degree. She had never been apprised of the consequences of exceeding one's limitations, of expending one's entire being. Arya delved deep within herself, past the reservoir of energy she normally employed for recuperation, past the safety parameters meticulously instilled by her parents, down to the very core of her life force. And she drew. Power surged through her, untamed and primal and agonizing. This was not conventional healing magic. This was something ancient, something that felt as though it were tearing her asunder from within. Life Weaver. A distant fragment of her consciousness whispered, the primordial gift, the forbidden one. She unleashed all of it upon the rogue, not for restoration, but for depletion. Vitality could flow in either direction. She stripped the life from his body, observing with grim satisfaction as he stumbled and collapsed, aged decades in mere seconds, his fur turning mottled gray before his respiration ceased entirely. The repercussions struck her with the force of a physical blow. Employing Lifeweaver for eradication rather than healing was, evidently, not advisable. Who would have presumed? Arya might have chuckled had she possessed the breath to do so. She crawled towards the cub, each movement sending fresh waves of torment through her frame. The small wolf watched her with wide, fearful blue eyes, emitting soft whimpers. Up close, she could perceive his striking beauty, his pristine white fur marred only by the bloodstains. Royal bloodlines invariably manifested their purity. If the rogue had referred to him as a little prince, it implied this cub belonged to one of the ruling lineages, perhaps even the Alpha King himself. "Hello, little one," Arya whispered, extending a trembling hand to gently stroke his head. "It is all right. You are secure now. I have you." The cub whined and attempted to lick her hand. His injuries were severe, but not immediately life-threatening, unlike her own. If she channeled her gift towards his recovery, she would have nothing left for herself. She would perish. But if she neglected his healing, he might not survive until aid arrived. He had lost an immense quantity of blood. That leg would never properly mend without magical intervention, and the gashes on his back were sufficiently deep to risk infection. In truth, the decision was not even a choice. "This will feel peculiar," she informed him, placing both hands upon his small form, "but it will offer relief. I give you my word." Arya reached for her gift once more, but this time she drew not from the rogue or the surrounding forest. She drew from herself, from her own life essence, the very force sustaining her heartbeat and her breathing. Life Weaver permitted the transfer of vitality between living entities. She had always been taught that one could only transfer what another could afford to relinquish, that extracting too much would prove fatal to both healer and patient. Her parents, it seemed, had never faced a situation desperate enough to test these boundaries. Arya poured every last iota of her being into the cub. She felt his fractured limbs align and mend. She sensed the wounds on his back seal and close. New fur began to sprout over tender pink skin. She felt his strength return, his breathing stabilize, his pain recede. She gave and gave and gave until there was absolutely nothing left to impart. The world began to fade at the edges. Her heart slowed. Her breathing had ceased at some point, and she hadn't even registered it. That was likely problematic. The cub was healed, completely, perfectly healed. He was nuzzling her face, whining with distress, as if comprehending her sacrifice. "It's all right," Arya slurred, her words barely audible. "You will be well. Someone will find you. Someone of importance, I suspect. You are far too magnificent to be a nobody like myself." Her eyelids fluttered shut. She felt herself falling, but it was a distant sensation, as if it were happening to another person. This was a fitting end, she mused, far preferable to expiring alone in the wilderness, unmourned. At least she had preserved someone. At least her final act had held meaning. The darkness enveloped her completely. She did not witness the cub tilt back its head and unleash a howl, a sound far too potent for something so small. She did not perceive the way the howl reverberated through the forest, carrying a frequency discernible only to specific bloodlines. And she did not see the wolves that began to converge. First, the wild ones appeared, wolves of pure white who dwelled deep within the ancient woods, drawn by the surge of Life Weaver magic that had erupted across the terrain when Arya unleashed her gift. They emerged from the shadows with slow, deliberate caution, forming a silent perimeter around the fallen woman and the cub. They could sense her nature, her deed, and they recognized power when they encountered it. This was a Life Weaver, the first in 3 centuries, and she had employed her gift to safeguard a child. That rendered her sacred. That made her worthy of protection. More wolves arrived, summoned by the cub's mournful cry and the gathering of the wild ones. These were different, larger, all possessing immaculate white pelts that marked them as royal guardians. And at their heart, moving with greater speed than the rest, came the most formidable wolf Arya never had the chance to behold. Kale, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, burst into the clearing and transitioned to human form before his momentum had even fully ceased. His hair was the color of pale gold, almost silver in the moonlight, and his eyes were the same brilliant blue as the cub's. He surveyed the scene with a single, sweeping glance. 3 deceased rogues, a tiny white cub lamenting over the body of a woman, and that woman lying in a pool of her own blood, so pallid she resembled a specter. No, not a specter. She was breathing, albeit faintly. The slightest rise and fall of her chest, the feeblest flutter of a pulse in her neck. She was alive, but precariously so. Cale's wolf was in a state of extreme agitation, clawing at his consciousness with an urgency he had never before experienced. Mate, mate, mate. The bond struck him like a bolt of lightning, powerful, undeniable, and terrifying. This woman, this stranger who had inexplicably found herself in the midst of the forest with his son, was his true mate, his son, Finn. Cale's heart had been lodged in his throat for the preceding 3 hours, ever since the ambush on their traveling entourage had resulted in Finn's abduction. He had pursued them for miles, following the scent of his cub and the rogues who had spirited him away, imploring the moon goddess for swift intervention. He had anticipated finding his son deceased or near death. He had prepared himself to personally deliver a slow, agonizing end to the rogues, making them suffer for every tremor of fear they had inflicted upon his cub. He had not anticipated discovering them already deceased, slain by an Omega who appeared to have barely survived the confrontation herself. No, she hadn't survived. She was dying before his eyes at this very moment. "Healers!" Cale bellowed, even as he knelt beside her, his hands hovering over her body, hesitant to touch and potentially inflict further harm. "Now!" 2 wolves from his guard immediately shifted and ran back towards the camp they had left behind. The others formed a defensive perimeter, scanning the surrounding woods for any indication of additional rogues. Finn, his brave, foolish, beloved son, crawled into Cale's lap and whimpered, pawing at his father's chest. Cale enfolded his cub in one arm, holding him close, experiencing an overwhelming wave of relief at having him back, safe and sound. But his gaze remained fixed upon the woman. She appeared so young, perhaps in her mid-20s, with features that would have been strikingly beautiful if they were not slack with unconsciousness and tinged gray from blood loss. Her white hair fanned out around her head like a halo, matted with gore and grime. Her attire was in tatters, revealing numerous injuries, any single one of which should have proven fatal. Yet it was her hands that captured his attention. They rested on Finn's fur, even in her unconscious state, as if she had been petting him when she collapsed. And a faint luminescence emanated from those hands, a shimmer of magic that Cale recognized from ancient texts and forgotten lore. "Life Weaver," he breathed. "You are a Life Weaver." That revelation explained so much, why Finn was perfectly healthy despite the blood matting his fur, which Cale could now discern was his own. Why this woman lay dying despite her youth and presumed strength. She had invoked the forbidden gift, the one that allowed for the transference of life force itself. She had saved Finn by bestowing upon him her own vitality. She had been willing to sacrifice her life for a cub she did not know, for his son, his heir, and she was his mate, though she likely had no inkling of it yet, given that she had probably never felt the bond through the haze of her pain and imminent demise. Cale made a resolute decision at that very moment, kneeling in the blood-soaked earth with his son cradled in his arms and his dying mate at his feet. She had preserved the most precious entity in his world. She had given her all to protect a child she had never met. He would move heaven and earth to save her in return. The healers arrived within minutes, 3 of them, the most accomplished in his service. They took one look at the woman, and their expressions turned grim. "Your Majesty," the head healer, an elder named Vera, stated with careful deliberation, "I am uncertain if you will survive her." Cale countered, his voice devoid of any room for debate. "I do not care what it requires. I do not care if you must perform miracles. She saved my son. She is a life weaver, and she is my mate. You will not allow her to perish." Vera's eyes widened at this declaration, but she nodded sharply and commenced her work. The other 2 healers joined her, their hands glowing with restorative magic as they toiled feverishly to stabilize the most critical injuries, beginning with internal bleeding, then the punctured lung, followed by the fractured bones. They worked for a continuous period of 20 minutes. Their efforts strained and their brows beaded with sweat, channeling every ounce of their power to preserve the life of this enigmatic woman. Finally, Vera leaned back, wiping her forehead. She is stable, barely. She will require constant attention for the next week, at minimum, potentially longer, but she should recover. The relief that washed over Cale was almost painful. Fetch a stretcher. We are transporting her to the palace immediately, and someone attend to my son. He is covered in blood. Finn whimpered and refused to relinquish his position beside the woman. He had shifted at some point during the healing process back to his diminutive human form. A 2-year-old boy with pale blonde hair and his mother's blue eyes. He was clinging to the woman's arm, tears streaming down his face. "Papa, don't let her die," he sobbed. "She saved me. The bad men were hurting me, and she made them stop. She's kind. Don't let her die." Cale's heart ached. Finn had spoken very little since his mother's passing in childbirth 2 years prior. He had been gradually withdrawing, becoming quieter and more timid, despite all of Cale's efforts to help him heal. And now, here he was, speaking in complete sentences, pleading for the life of a stranger who had sacrificed everything to protect him. "She is not going to die," Cale promised, gently lifting his son into his arms. "I swear it, Finn. She will be all right, and when she awakens, you can express your gratitude yourself." They fashioned a makeshift stretcher from branches and cloaks, handling the woman with the utmost care. Cale carried Finn, who refused to release the woman's hand, resulting in an unusual procession with the boy stretched between his father's arms and the woman's side. The wild wolves that had congregated dispersed back into the forest, but Cale noticed they did not venture far. They followed, remaining just beyond the visible range, clearly unwilling to entirely abandon the life weaver. That would require consideration at a later juncture. For the present, his sole concern was to ensure her safety and survival. The journey back to the palace spanned 3 days. They were compelled to proceed at a leisurely pace to avoid undue jostling, and frequent stops were necessary for the healers to reinforce their restorative efforts. Cale obtained minimal sleep, dedicating most of his time to vigilantly watching over her, one hand holding his son and the other resting close enough to his mate to feel her faint heartbeat through their bond. Over those 3 days, he learned everything he could about her. Her name was Arya, according to the documentation found in her belongings. She was an itinerant healer with no pack affiliation, 22 years of age, born to Samuel and Lydia, both deceased. No living relatives were listed. She possessed virtually no assets of significant value. Some medicinal supplies, a spare set of clothing, her father's knife still bearing traces of rogue blood, and a small tome that proved to be her mother's journal of herbal remedies. She was alone in the world, had been so since she was 15, if Cale's interpretation of the dates was accurate. 7 years of solitary wandering, likely enduring prejudice and suspicion due to her peculiar appearance. 7 years of subsisting day by day, with no permanent abode to return to. Not anymore. She had a home now, whether she desired it or not. She had a mate and a cub who had imprinted upon her with such intensity that Finn erupted into a wailing fit whenever they attempted to separate him from her for more than a few minutes. She had a future, if Cale had any say in the matter. Upon their eventual arrival at the palace, Cale arranged for her to be settled in a suite of rooms directly adjacent to his own. The healers established a round-the-clock rotation to monitor her, and Cale made it unequivocally clear that her well-being was their paramount concern. Finn refused to leave her side, sleeping on a small cot next to her bed, his hand clasped in hers even in slumber. It had been 6 days before she regained consciousness. 6 days of observing her chest's gentle rhythm, of feeling the profound connection between them deepen as her body mended, of his son speaking to her unresponsive form about trivialities and profound truths alike, as if his words alone could draw her back from wherever she had strayed. On the 6th day, shortly after the sun had risen, her eyelids fluttered open. Kyle was present. He was a constant. He watched as her eyes, a soft gray, blinked slowly, filled with a hazy confusion. She attempted to sit up, only to gasp in sudden pain and sink back against the pillows. "Gently," Kyle murmured, moving to her side. You are safe. You are within the palace walls. You have been unconscious for 6 days." Arya's gaze finally sharpened on him, and Kyle saw the instant recognition dawn in her eyes, the acknowledgement of his inherent authority, the understanding of precisely who stood before her. Yet there was no trace of fear, only profound weariness and bewilderment. "The child," she rasped, her voice raw from disuse. "Is he well?" "He is unharmed," Kyle assured her. "Thanks to your intervention. He is right here. In fact, he has not left your side since we brought you in." He indicated a small pallet beside her where Finn was nestled, his fingers still loosely clasped around her hand in his sleep. The sight brought tears to Arya's eyes. "I believed I had perished," she whispered. "I gave him all I possessed. I thought nothing would remain." "You came perilously close to death," Kyle admitted truthfully. "You utilized the Life Weaver's gift. You bestowed your own life force upon my son to heal him. Do you comprehend the rarity of such a gift? Its inherent danger?" Arya's eyes widened. "Life Weaver. But that is said to be extinct, lost for centuries. I am merely a healer. I did not intend to." "You awakened it," Kyle explained with gentle emphasis. "In a moment of absolute selflessness, striving to preserve the life of someone you did not even know. This is how the gift operates, according to ancient texts. It manifests only in individuals with the purest of intentions." He paused, observing her expression. "My name is Kyle. I am the Alpha King of the Northern Territories, and the child you rescued is my son, Finn, my sole heir to this throne. You did not merely save a stray pup. You saved my entire world." The gravity of his words seemed to overwhelm her in that instant. Arya closed her eyes, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I was unaware. He was so small, and they intended to harm him. I could not permit it." "I understand," Kyle said softly. "That is what makes you extraordinary. You witnessed a child in peril and acted without hesitation. You sacrificed everything to shield him." He hesitated for a moment before adding, "There is one more thing you must know. When I discovered you, I sensed the bond, the mate bond. You are my destined mate, Arya." Her eyes flew open, disbelief etched across her features. "That cannot be. I am no one. I do not even belong to a pack. The moon goddess would not—" "The moon goddess paired you with me, because you are precisely what I require," Kyle interjected. "Someone possessing the courage to face impossible odds. Someone selfless enough to lay down their life for a stranger's child. Someone strong enough to unlock a gift lost for 300 years. He slowly extended his hand, giving her the option to retreat, and gently took her free hand. "I am not expecting you to accept this immediately. I am aware this is a great deal to absorb, but I want you to know that you are secure here. You have a place amongst us, and my son has clearly claimed you as his own. Therefore, you will not be escaping our presence easily." As if summoned by his words, Finn stirred and opened his eyes. Seeing Arya awake, his face lit up with pure joy. "You're awake, Dada. She's awake. I told you she would wake up." He scrambled onto the bed, moving with utmost care to avoid her injuries, and enveloped her in a tight hug. "Thank you for saving me. The bad men were frightening, and you made them leave. You are so brave. Will you stay? Please, stay. I don't want you to go." Arya appeared overwhelmed by the enthusiastic toddler clinging to her, but Kyle observed a soft, tender warmth bloom in her eyes. "Hello, my dear," she said, her voice gentle and a little awkward as she patted his back with her free hand. "I am so glad you are well. You have fully recovered, haven't you?" "Nothing hurts." "Nothing hurts," Finn confirmed. "You made me all better. Dada says you gave me your life to heal me. That makes you my hero, and you're also beautiful, like the snow." "I like snow." Despite the circumstances, the pain, the confusion, and the sheer magnitude of the situation, Arya let out a laugh. It was faint and shaky, but undeniably genuine. "I like snow too," she murmured softly. In the ensuing weeks, Arya's recovery was gradual. Kyle ensured she had every conceivable comfort, the finest nourishment, soft garments, engaging reading material, and periods of undisturbed peace when she desired them. Most importantly, however, he afforded her ample space. He did not press the issue of the mate bond, nor did he make any demands, allowing her the time to heal and acclimate to her new reality. Finn, on the other hand, possessed no understanding of personal boundaries. He was inseparable from Arya's side from the moment she could rise from bed. He followed her everywhere, prattling about his playthings, his studies, his father, and anything else that occupied his 2-year-old mind. Initially, Arya seemed uncertain in her interactions with him, slightly awkward with his physical closeness and constant attention. Yet gradually, Kyle witnessed her defenses soften. He saw her begin to smile when Finn would run towards her. He observed her instinctively reach out to him when he stumbled. He watched as she naturally assumed the role of a mother, a role Finn had never known, not out of obligation from the mate bond, but because her genuine affection for the little boy who adored her grew with each passing day. The Life Weaver gift presented a different challenge. Arya harbored a deep-seated fear of it, reluctant to employ it, apprehensive of its potential consequences. Kyle sought out scholars and ancient texts, anyone who might possess knowledge regarding this unique ability. Together they discovered that life weaving was not merely about the transfer of vitality. It involved an intrinsic understanding of balance and the interconnected flow of life energy within all living beings. Through diligent practice and instruction, Arya learned to heal without critically depleting her own strength. She developed the capacity to detect illness before it manifested and to fortify an individual's life force without drawing from her own reserves. She became an invaluable asset to the palace healers, imparting techniques that had been lost for centuries. However, her most significant breakthrough occurred when she discovered an unforeseen capability. She could perceive emotional distress as acutely as physical ailments. She gained the ability to aid in healing trauma, alleviate anxiety, and bring solace during nightmares. It was this particular aspect of her gift that ultimately assisted Finn in processing the grief of his mother's passing. It helped him understand that embracing new love did not diminish the memory of the mother he had never truly known. 3 months after Arya's initial awakening within the palace, Kyle found her in the gardens, accompanied by Finn. It was a balmy afternoon, and they were engaged in the creation of floral crowns. Finn's small hands, though clumsy, were imbued with determination, as Arya patiently guided him in weaving the stems together. "For you, Dada," Finn announced, noticing Kyle's approach, holding up a slightly lopsided daisy crown. "We made you pretty." Kyle obligingly stooped, allowing his son to place the crown upon his head, eliciting a delighted giggle. "Very pretty," he agreed with mock solemnity. "Thank you, Finn. Did you make one for Arya as well?" "She made her own," Finn replied, "because she's a big girl, and big girls can do things themselves, but I helped." Arya smiled, her own crown of wildflowers askew upon her pale hair. She appeared remarkably transformed from the woman Kyle had found near death in the forest. Now a healthy glow graced her cheeks, and a vibrant light shone in her eyes. She radiated happiness. "Finn, why don't you go show your crown to Healer Vera?" Kyle suggested. "I'm certain she would be delighted to see it." "Okay." Finn bounced to his feet and dashed towards the palace, his energy seemingly inexhaustible. Kyle sat on the bench beside Arya, maintaining a respectful distance, always mindful of her personal space. "He loves you," he said quietly. "You understand that, don't you? Not because of what you did for him, not due to some mystical connection, but because you are patient with him, kind, and you make him feel secure." Arya gazed down at her floral crown, her fingers gently tracing the petals. "I love him too," she confessed. "I never anticipated it. I never envisioned having children. I never believed I would have the opportunity, without a pack and without a mate. But Finn, he is extraordinary. He is sweet, courageous, and brimming with life. Being with him makes me feel as though perhaps I am no longer merely a wanderer, as though perhaps I could be someone's mother." "You could be his mother, Arya," Kyle finished softly, "if you wished it. He needs one, and I believe you need him just as much as he needs you. I am not his mother. Arya stated, though her voice lacked conviction. His mother died. I am simply... You are the woman who has nurtured him for the past 3 months, Kyle affirmed. The one who kisses his bruises, reads him stories, and teaches him about flowers. The one he rushes to when he experiences nightmares. The one whose room he secretly enters each night because he feels safer sleeping near you. Biology does not define a mother. Love does. Tears welled in Arya's eyes. I am afraid, she whispered. What if I am not adequate? What if I inadvertently harm him? I do not know how to be a mother. My own mother passed away when I was too young to recall her clearly. Neither did his biological mother, Kyle pointed out gently. She died before she could hold him. But you know what you possess? You have a gift for understanding emotions, for healing trauma, for making individuals feel valued. You saved his life once. Now you are saving it anew each day simply by being present, by demonstrating to him that he is worthy of love and protection. He reached out and took her hand, interlacing his fingers with hers. And you have me. We can navigate this together. We can be his parents, as a unit, if you will permit us. Arya looked from their joined hands to his face. The mate bond, she said hesitantly. I can feel it now. I could not before, when I was too weak. But it is present, drawing me, assuring me that you are mine. I have felt it since the moment I saw you, Kyle admitted, lying in the dirt, covered in blood, barely breathing, and my only thought was, mine. My mate, the woman I have awaited my entire existence. But I want to be clear about one thing, Arya. I do not want you to feel compelled by the bond. I do not want you to accept me simply because destiny dictates it. If we embark on this journey, I want it to be a conscious choice you make. Not because the moon goddess has decreed our union, but because you awaken each morning and decide you wish to be with me. That is a considerable weight, Arya remarked, but a faint smile played on her lips. What if I decide I do not wish to be with you? Then I shall honor your decision, Kyle responded with utmost sincerity. You will still have a place here. You will still serve as Finn's guardian, should you desire. The mate bond does not grant me ownership of you. It is a gift, not a shackle, and gifts can be declined. Arya studied his face for a long moment, her gray eyes searching his. You truly mean that? She asked, wonder coloring her tone. You would truly allow me to depart if I requested it. I would allow you to depart, Kyle confirmed, but I would genuinely prefer if you remained, and I would profoundly prefer, eventually, if you would consider embracing the bond, because I believe we could achieve remarkable things together. I believe you could be not only Finn's mother, but my partner, my equal, my Luna. I have never been anyone's equal, Arya said quietly. I have always been the peculiar one, the phantom girl, the outcast. People tolerate me because I am useful, not because they value me. I value you, Kyle stated firmly, not because you are useful, though you certainly are, not because you saved my son, though I will be eternally grateful for that, but because you are intelligent, strong, and kind, even after the world has given you every reason not to be. Because you elicit laughter from my son, because you are imparting techniques to my healers that they never imagined, because when I look at you, I envision my future. He raised her hand to his lips, bestowing a gentle kiss upon her knuckles. Take your time. There is no need for haste. We have all the time in the world, but know that I am here, waiting, hopeful, and ready to construct something extraordinary with you whenever you feel prepared. Arya did not respond with words. Instead, she leaned forward and rested her head on his shoulder, a gesture of trust that conveyed more than any spoken declaration. They remained in that posture for a considerable time, floral crowns adorning their heads and fingers intertwined, while Finn's joyful laughter echoed through the garden. It took another month before Arya approached Kyle's study one evening, her expression a mixture of nervousness and resolute determination. I have made my decision, she announced without preamble, regarding the bond and about us. Kyle's heart hammered against his ribs, but he maintained a placid, outward demeanor. And I wish to try, Arya continued. Not because fate dictates it, but because you have demonstrated remarkable patience with me, because you provided me the space to heal and the time to contemplate, because you allowed me to grow fond of your son without any expectations, because now, when I envision my future, you are both an integral part of it. Relief and sheer joy surged through Kyle with such intensity that he could barely draw a breath. Are you certain? You can still alter your decision. I meant what I said about... Arya stepped forward and kissed him, interrupting his hesitant words. It was a soft, tentative embrace, their very first kiss, and it caused the mate bond between them to flare with such brilliance that they both gasped. When they drew apart, both breathing heavily, Arya smiled. I am sure. I want this. I want you. I want to be Finn's mother, your mate, and the Luna of this pack. I want to cease running and begin living. I desire a family. Then you have one, Kyle declared, drawing her into a close embrace. You have us, for as long as you will have us. The joining ceremony was conducted under the full moon a week later, with Finn serving as the ring-bearer, nearly fumbling the banns on 3 separate occasions. The entire pack was in attendance, along with representatives from neighboring territories. However, the most unexpected guests were the white wolves that emerged from the depths of the forest, wild creatures never before seen in the vicinity of the palace. They formed a protective circle around the ceremony, a silent honor guard for the life weaver who had united their kind and the shifters. When Kyle marked Arya, claiming her as his mate and Luna before the assembled multitude, the bond between them settled perfectly into place. It was not a chain binding her against her will, but a conscious choice they had both freely made, a partnership founded on mutual respect, trust, and love. Finn cheered louder than any other, then eagerly inquired if this meant Arya was officially his mother. Yes, Arya confirmed, kneeling to embrace him. If you want me to be. I want it. Finn wrapped his arms around her neck. Best mother ever, even better than flower crowns. Years later, when Finn had grown older and commenced his own training as heir, he would often ask his mother about the day she saved him, about what compelled her to risk everything for a stranger's child. Arya would smile and pull him close. You were not a stranger, she would explain. The moment I saw you hurt and frightened, you became mine to protect. That is what family does. We safeguard one another, and you bestowed upon me the most profound gift in return. You gave me a reason to cease running and to begin living. You gave me a home. And Finn, who would grow to become a strong and compassionate leader, would carry those words with him. He would establish his reign upon the principles his mother had imparted, that true strength is measured not by power, but by sacrifice, that the most effective leaders are those who dedicate themselves to protecting the vulnerable, and that family, though not always defined by blood, is invariably a choice. The life weaver's gift would persist through the royal lineage, manifesting in Finn's own children generations hence. And the tale of the phantom girl who rescued a prince and ascended to become a queen would be recounted time and again. It became a legend of sacrifice and affection, serving as a constant reminder to all wolves that the moon goddess favors those with pure hearts,